Being recorded. All right, great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Tonight's presentation is entitled The Legends and Lore of the Bridgewater Triangle. We're joined by paranormal researcher Tim Weisberg for a journey through the history, haunts, and high strangeness of Southern New England's own paranormal vortex, the Bridgewater Triangle. UFOs spotted in the skies of Colonial Massachusetts, cryptid creatures in the woods and the seas, ghostly encounters, the mysterious, Pukwudgies, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, roaming the Freetown State Forest. It's going to get weird, which is just how we like it here in the Triangle. Tim is the host of Spooky South Coast, one of the world's leading radio programs on the paranormal, and I believe he's going live tonight at 10 o'clock. He's on the air tonight, so thanks for joining us before then, Tim. He's a writer, researcher, and producer for several TV programs, including Haunted Towns, Ghost Asylum, and Ghost Stalkers. He has appeared on TV's Ghost Adventures, My Ghost Story, and Monster Quest. He's also the author of Ghosts of the South Coast and the co-author of Haunted Objects, Stories of Ghosts on Your Shelf. And before I introduce Tim, I wanted to thank the Friends of the Tewksbury Library for being the primary sponsor for tonight's program. And I especially want to thank all the libraries who are partnering with Tewksbury tonight, who really helped us get the word out. And those libraries include Boxford, Clinton, Dracut, Hudson, Littleton, Lowell, Norwood, Raleigh, Stoughton, West Newbury, and Wilmington. So for all those watching live here on Zoom and those also on Facebook and those that will be watching on demand and later on YouTube, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Tim for joining us here tonight. And Tim, the floor is yours. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Robert. Very excited to be here with everybody from the Bridgewater Triangle because I do live in the Bridgewater Triangle. I do live in Wareham, but we'll get into why that's part of the Bridgewater Triangle in just a little bit. As you can see behind me, we have a pretty large Bridgewater Triangle, but we're going to make it even larger as we discuss some of the legends and lore of the Triangle. Really quickly here, you can see on the screen these different ways to consume my two radio programs. As Robert mentioned, I'll be on at 10 o'clock tonight with Midnight Society on Midnight FM. That airs weeknights on the midnight.fm website and also on the TalkStream Live app, on the Paranormal Radio app, on TuneIn. If you have an Alexa device, you can use TuneIn on your Alexa device to listen that way. But if you want to hear some of our past episodes, you have to sign up for a membership. They start at $5 a month to get access to our archives. Spooky South Coast is my other program, which I've been doing now for almost 16 years. And that is available free wherever you get your podcasts. And we also have hundreds of episodes of that show on YouTube as well. So you can watch some of those videos, including every year, we do our annual Bridgewater Triangle investigation show, where we send paranormal teams out into the Triangle to investigate some of these legends that we'll talk about tonight, as well as others. And then they call into the program to let us know what's happening out in the field. And coincidentally, tomorrow night will be our annual Bridgewater Triangle investigation show. So if you want to listen to that live as it's happening, the best way to do so is to go to WBSM.com or to go and download the WBSM app. So if you have any problems with that at all and trying to remember all of that, it's easy. All you have to do is reach out to me. And you can find me at tim@midnight.fm, tim@spookysouthcoast.com. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Snapchat, I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/theotherTimWeisberg, because the guy who plays the flute back in the 70s, he beat me to the regular Tim Weisberg page. So I'll just be the other one. Also, I haven't put it on here, but you can follow me on TikTok. I'm a little ashamed of myself for being on TikTok. I'm a 43-year-old man, but you can find me on there at Tim Weisberg78. So, because, I wanted everybody to know that I'm a 43-year-old man, so I put the year of my birth in there. So as Robert mentioned, I have been involved with a couple of different programs that you've probably seen on television. Ghost Stalkers was my first chance to work in TV. I was the writer, the researcher on that program. Then I moved into the similar role and also as a producer on Ghost Asylum. And then I worked on season 1 of Haunted Towns. So it was really worked out well for everybody because they kept me behind the scenes because nobody wanted to see me on a television screen every week. Until all of a sudden I get the call last year to take part in a program called Hotel Paranormal. And I was very excited about the opportunity to talk about haunted hotels because I love staying in hotels. I hope every time I go to one that it's haunted. So I was more than happy to take part in this show. Then I found out after I went and filmed my stuff for it, they hired Dan Aykroyd to be the narrator of that show. So yes, I share an IMDb credit with Dan Aykroyd. As far as I'm concerned, that makes me officially a Ghostbuster. And then also just debuting today, actually they released it last night, a little bit of a sneak surprise there, but on the Tubi streaming service, there's a new documentary called Famously Haunted Amityville that I'm featured in along with my Spooky South Coast co-host Stephanie Burke. So go ahead and check that out. All you have to do is download the Tubi app, whether it be on your smartphone, your laptop, your smart TV, wherever you want to get it. Cable boxes will have it. Download Tubi, Tubi, and just type in Famously Haunted Amityville and you can watch it completely free. There's no need to put in your name or email or credit card or anything. It's an ad-supported streaming service. So let's get into the Bridgewater Triangle. I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard that term. You may have seen the documentary that came out in 2013-14. You may have seen some other programs that have started talking about the Bridgewater Triangle in recent years. Well, we're going to dive in all the way at the very beginning because the term the Bridgewater Triangle was actually coined by cryptozoologist Loren Coleman in his 1983 book, Mysterious America. Now, Coleman had actually been using that term for a while, but 1983, when that book was published, was the first time that it was put into print. And this is the great Loren Coleman right here. If you've ever gone up to the International Cryptozoology Museum up in Portland, Maine, you may have been fortunate enough to get to hang out with Loren. I would have invited him to take part in this tonight to say hi to everybody, but Loren is an even bigger Red Sox fan than Robert, so nobody can bother him on game night. So he'll be enjoying that game. Hopefully it'll be a win. So Coleman started researching strange and unusual phenomena when he came to this area. And he realized that he was getting a high amount of reports in this very small geographical region. And of course, anybody that has been into the Bridgewater area, you know there's 3 different parts of Bridgewater. There's East Bridgewater, West Bridgewater, and Bridgewater proper. So as Coleman is logging all of this information, he sees that it makes a natural triangle. So he dubs it the Bridgewater Triangle, partially because it is a triangle, partially because it is made up of different towns called Bridgewater, and partially because the Bermuda Triangle book by Charles Berlitz was hugely popular at the time, and he figured, why not crib a little bit of that popularity for the research that I'm doing as well. So fast forward a couple of years, maybe about 18 or so, and what you have is a new batch of researchers that pick up the mantle of the idea of the Bridgewater Triangle, the idea that there is this high concentration of all different types of paranormal activity happening in one relatively small geographic area. Now, paranormal activity can be documented everywhere, but the reason why this has become what they call a window area or a paranormal vortex area is because it's a lot of different types of phenomena and a lot of highly concentrated reports. So we had to expand the triangle as years went on. So new researchers like Chris Pittman, Christopher Balzano, they picked up the idea of the Bridgewater Triangle and they started writing about it on their websites. A young college student by the name of Aaron Cadieux happened across this information online and turned it into his college video project. He made a documentary called Inside the Bridgewater Triangle. It was a 30-minute documentary that technically has never been allowed to be released because he used licensed music in it because it was just a school project. Somebody may have gotten a DVD copy of that back in 2006 and uploaded it to what used to be known as Google Video, but has now become YouTube. I don't know who might have done that. Certainly, I don't know what the statute of limitations is on copyright laws, so we'll keep his name out of it for now. But that became a very popular video online. And of course, talking about it on programs like Spooky South Coast, it really kept the idea of the triangle out there. So that's why Aaron teamed up with Manny Famulare and made the full-length, feature-length Bridgewater Triangle documentary back in 2014, because now that is something that, you know, can be 2013, sorry. That is something that can be released because they went and they got all the rights and clearances. So it originally came out, we had it in theaters, we had it available for DVD and Blu-ray, we had it at one point streaming as a special live event. All of that stuff is still available. It's all out there, but it's now also available free on YouTube. So you can watch the entire documentary on YouTube for free. Just make sure that you're searching for the actual Bridgewater Triangle documentary, and it comes from Bristol County Media. So let's get into a little bit of what type of reports we get in this new version of the triangle. This is how I would define it in 2020. We're talking about an expanded region that has to incorporate, in my opinion, because of that high level, and it's not a very good triangle, I know, but because of that high level of activity that's happening in all of these other places, you can't exclude them from a triangle setup. So yes, we still have a high amount of activity in the Bridgewaters. We still have a high amount of activity in the Freetown State Forest, which is where you'll see this heart. That's the Hockomock Swamp. That's what a lot of people consider to be the heart of the Bridgewater Triangle. I would actually say you got to shift it a little bit south down to the Freetown State Forest, which is that green area right outside of Fall River. That is where a lot of the power of the Bridgewater Triangle comes from, and we're going to get into that. But as you go into all of these different reports, you realize, well, Cape Cod has a large amount of ghost stories, UFO sightings, sea creatures, cryptid creatures, all of these things going on. We can't exclude that from the triangle. And then you get into Boston. And of course, Boston has a high level of paranormal activity. Go all the way north up to Salem. And actually, you get into the top of the vertex there at the top of the triangle, you get into America's Stonehenge up in Salem, New Hampshire, which is actually, I've only recently found out, strangely on a straight line with the original Stonehenge over in England, like a ley line, which are these interconnected lines between places where strange phenomena happens. And then also, as it goes across from New Hampshire to England, it also goes south in a straight line to a spot called Dighton Rock, which is in Dighton, Massachusetts, on the Taunton River. So there's another strange place tied directly into a straight line. So as much as a triangle becomes a catchy title, there might actually be something to the idea of what they call sacred geometry, that there are reasons why all of this ties in together. So let's start off with some of the earliest reports of the Bridgewater Triangle, and I'm gonna check the questions as we go, just to make sure that I'm not stepping on anything. So cryptozoologist, what is a cryptozoologist? Was the question. I should answer that so that you understand what it is. A cryptozoologist is somebody who looks into hidden creatures. So they are creatures that are not quite known and cataloged. We're going to get into some of what they call cryptids in this discussion, but it's basically things like, Bigfoot. Think of Bigfoot as a cryptid creature. It's something that people study and believe exists, but we don't have proof of it existing yet. And so a cryptozoologist studies those type of creatures the same way a regular zoologist would study known animals. And then the other question that had popped in there really quickly, is Stoughton a part of the Bridgewater Triangle? Absolutely. So if you live there, I'm sorry to tell you, you're in the triangle. And you will absolutely experience some paranormal activity really anywhere in Massachusetts, anywhere in New England. It's all fair game. It's just that in the triangle, there's a lot more of it. So let's look at the first UFO sighting that is reported. I don't think it's surprising that it comes from the colonial era. On March 1st, 1639, Massachusetts Bay Colony Governor John Winthrop opened his diary in which he recorded the trials and triumphs of his fellow Puritans as they made their new life in America. And as he was sitting there recounting what was going on, he wrote a little bit of passage about something that really had caused the stir among the settlers. He wrote that earlier in the year, James Everell, a sober, discreet man, as Winthrop describes him, and two others were rowing a boat in the muddy river, which flowed through swampland and emptied into a tidal basin in the Charles River, where they saw a great light in the night sky. And here's the actual words of Governor Winthrop. When it stood still, it flamed up and was about 3 yards square. When it ran, it was contracted into the figure of a swine. So this strange light in the sky takes the shape of a pig. There's a little bit of a strange Amityville connection for anybody that knows about Jody the ghost pig from Amityville. So this went on for a couple of hours. The boatman said that the mysterious light, quote, ran as swift as an arrow, darting back and forth between them and the village of Charlestown, which was about a 2-mile distance. And Winthrop wrote, diverse other credible persons saw the same light after about the same place. So we're getting reports of lights in the sky in 1639. We're talking about almost 300 years before we had actual flight. So that is not, it's not a plane, it's not a helicopter, it's not a drone, it's not all of these things that we use now to dismiss lights in the sky. It's a little bit harder to explain in 1639. But that wasn't the only colonial era UFO sighting. 5 years later in Boston, another entry in Winthrop's diary said that on January 18th of 1644, here's the direct quote, about midnight, 3 men coming in a boat to Boston saw 2 lights arise out of the water near the north point of the town cove in form like a man, and went at a small distance to the town and so to the south point, and there vanished away. So here we have more lights in the sky, these actually coming out of the water, which there is a phenomenon known as unidentified submersed objects, USOs, UFOs that are actually seen coming out of the water. And here's a case of that, but it's shaped like a man. A week after that, Winthrop wrote another unexplained celestial event occurred over Boston Harbor. A light like the moon arose about the northeast point in Boston and met the former at Noddle's Island. And there they closed in one and then parted and then closed and parted diverse times, and so went over the hill in the island and vanished. Sometimes they shot out flames and sometimes sparkles. This was about 8 o'clock in the evening and was seen by many. So another strange light in the sky seen by many, many people, and we're seeing it actually, coming together, pulling apart, coming together, pulling apart, with sparks and flames coming from it. I wouldn't think that that would be something as silly as St. Elmo's fire or swamp gas if it's doing all of that. And his account continued, about the same time, a voice was heard upon the water between Boston and Dorchester, calling out in a most dreadful manner, boy, boy, come away, come away. And it suddenly shifted from one place to another a great distance, about 20 times. It was heard by diverse godly persons, that's very important, they were godly persons. About 14 days after, the same voice and the same dreadful manner was heard by others on the other side of town toward Noddle's Island. So those are pretty convincing UFO accounts coming from 1639 and 1644. I mean, if you want to go back that far to talk about some of the UFO sightings, it's not a surprise that we have so much UFO activity still to this day in the Bridgewater Triangle. One of the more interesting stories about the Triangle actually comes from a place near me, Dartmouth, Massachusetts. This is what's known as Round Hill. This building is known as Colonel Green's mansion. Colonel Green wasn't really a colonel, he was just very rich. And when you're rich and you want to call yourself a colonel, people call you a colonel. So he actually inherited his wealth from his mother, who was known as the Witch of Wall Street, Hetty Green. She was, I believe, the first female millionaire. And she was a very shrewd woman on the stock market, made a lot of money. And so he was happy to use a lot of that money to build his great mansion. And you see this radio telescope next to it. That's because Colonel Green fancied himself a man of science, and he knew that his plot of land was a very attractive spot for certain activity and experimentation to take place. So he allowed for them to conduct electromagnetic experiments at Round Hill. And they built that great radio telescope because that was one of the first places where they had actual radio broadcasts. He had one of the first operating transatlantic radio stations ever. And over the years, the scientists that would come down there built some Van de Graaff generators to help try to increase the electrical charge of Round Hill to see if they could, continue to conduct experimentation. Well, those Van de Graaff generators that were at Round Hill are now inside the Boston Museum of Science, and those are the ones that they use to conduct the lightning show. So if you go to the Museum of Science and you see that lightning show, this was the spot where those Van de Graaff generators originally were set up. And every time they would turn on those Van de Graaff generators and start experimenting with electricity, they would get strange lights in the sky. And MIT was down there conducting a lot of experimentation, and the MIT scientists would report seeing these lights in the sky with no explanation as to what they could be. So here we have, the people that were probably the most in the know about what could possibly be up there in the skies, and they had no explanation for it. And this really kind of reached a culmination point during the 1966, 67, 68 UFO flap. Over those 3 years, there was a huge amount of UFOs that were seen all over New England. And then after that, it's been still pretty frequent that there are UFOs sighted around Hill, but nothing like it used to be back during that era. And now, of course, they've taken down the radio telescope, and these are all luxury condominiums. So for, I think it's $900,000, you can have I think it's a 1 or a 2 bedroom in a very haunted and very UFO friendly Round Hill. So now let's get into the idea of some of the cryptids. I had mentioned that is a creature that is hidden, a creature that is not known. So it's something that people will report, but science doesn't actually recognize. And one of the first cryptid stories came from the Native Americans. They would talk about the Thunderbird. And the Thunderbird was known as the man-sized bird that was often seen in the skies. Some people felt that it was a harbinger of doom. Others felt that it was related to how good of a crop you would have that year. But Thunderbirds were a common part of Native American mythology. Thunderbirds are something that are still seen to this day. People report them all the time within the Bridgewater Triangle. In the 1970s, there was a police officer who actually encountered a man-sized bird standing in the road at a place called Bird Hill. So not surprising there, that's in Raynham and near the old dog track. And he reported it having, being a man-sized bird with a wingspan beyond what a human being's arms could be. But the funny thing is, as I said, people still report seeing these today. I've noticed more and more that I've seen bald eagles making a big comeback. So I wouldn't be surprised to find out that some of these, giant birds that people are seeing, especially in the twilight of the morning or at dusk, that could be an eagle being mistaken. But when you have a police officer saying it was a man-sized bird standing on 2 legs at the top of the hill with its arms outstretched, I mean, that's something that's going to make you sit up and take notice. Another cryptid story that comes from the Bridgewater Triangle is that of the Dover Demon. 17-year-old William Bill Bartlett claimed that while driving on April 21st, 1977, he saw a large-eyed creature with tendril-like fingers and glowing eyes on top of a broken stone wall on Farm Street in Dover. 15-year-old John Baxter also reported seeing a similar creature on Miller Hill Road the same evening, and another 15-year-old, Abby Brabham, claimed to have seen the creature the following night on Springdale Avenue. So we have 3 different teenagers reported seeing this creature within a small distance of each other on consecutive nights. The teenagers all drew sketches of the alleged creature. Bartlett wrote on his sketch, which this is Bill Bartlett's sketch, and you can kind of see it a little bit toward the bottom right where you see a signature there. It says, "I, Bill Bartlett, swear on a stack of Bibles that I saw this creature." And according to the Boston Globe, the locations are only all within a 2-mile radius of each other. So what is it that, straight line of 2 miles. So what is it that this creature could have been? Well, if you're looking for a plausible earthbound explanation, some of the suggestions were that it was a foal or a moose calf. Police told the Associated Press that creatures reported by the teenagers were probably nothing more than a school vacation hoax. But to this day, Bartlett and the others, they stand by what it was that they saw. But what is it that they saw? What could that have been? A lot of people look at it and say, well, is it some kind of, gray alien? Is it some kind of space creature? But I posit it might actually have been another cryptid type creature from the Bridgewater Triangle, that of the Pukwudgie. The Pukwudgie, now we're venturing into the realm of legends, but the Pukwudgie was a Wampanoag trickster spirit that for a long time was not considered to be really negative. It was more mischievous, and it would cause problems for people, but they lived in harmony with people. Then at one point, the Pukwudgies all gathered on the shores of Assawampset Pond in Lakeville, and that was the home of the Wampanoag creator god Mashop. That's where he lived with his wife. They lived in the pond because they were giants, so they could live in a pond. But all the Pukwudgies gathered together on the shore, and they attacked Mashop and his wife. They pulled them under the water, and they drowned them. And after that happened, after Mashop and his wife died, from that moment on, the Pukwudgies were all considered to be evil creatures. And so people will report seeing them in the Freetown State Forest. They'll see these small, kind of humanoid type figures with red glowing eyes. And it's become a big, big part of the Freetown State Forest story, of course, for sure, but also the Bridgewater Triangle legend. And you can see here the Pukwudgie sign. That's actually owned by the Freetown Police Department. They had it made up, and every year on April Fool's Day, they put it out outside the Freetown State Forest. And another legend of the Bridgewater Triangle is that of the red-headed hitchhiker of Route 44. Now, first, let me just say that red-headed hitchhiker legends are not all that uncommon. Most long stretches of desolate road have a hitchhiker legend. Most of those hitchhiker legends involve him having red hair. I don't know why, but that has become the trope. Well, this story takes place on the Rehoboth-Seekonk line of Route 44. And as the story goes, if you're driving down that road at night, all by yourself, or maybe with one other person in the car, you'll be driving down the road and you'll see this man standing on the side of the road with his thumb out. He has long, red, scraggly hair, a big, bushy red beard. He's wearing a flannel shirt, dirty jeans, and boots. And when you pull over to let him into the car for a ride, he always gets into the back seat, whether you're the only person in the car or not. He's always getting in that back seat. And when you ask him where he wants to go, he never answers you. He just points in the direction that you were already headed. And people report that as they're driving down the road, all of a sudden, the hitchhiker will start to giggle. And then that giggle will start to develop into full-out laughter. And then it'll turn into a maniacal-like laughter that just starts splitting your ears. And when you can't stand it anymore, you'll pull over to the side of the road and turn around and yell at him to get out. But when you look, he's already gone. And the people who report this have also reported that as they've driven down the road further on, one man said he looked out the passenger side window and he saw the red-headed hitchhiker floating alongside the car, even though he was going 50 miles an hour down Route 44. Another woman said that as she was driving down the road after the hitchhiker disappeared from her car, she turned on the radio to try to get some music to calm herself down. And as she was listening to music driving down that road, suddenly the laughter of the hitchhiker started coming through the speakers of her car, even after she turned off the radio. So this was considered to be a legend with no real fact behind it. We had no proof of there being anybody that would have died on that part of the road or would be tied into that road legend at all. But I do a stage show with some friends of mine where we tell ghost stories in front of these awesome photographs that my friend Frank Grace takes. And when I first told that story at the very first stage show, somebody came up to me afterwards and said, I know that you said that the hitchhiker legend isn't true, but my brother was an EMT in Rehoboth in the 1970s, and there actually was a person who was struck and killed by a car. He died in my brother's arms, and he fit the exact description of the red-headed hitchhiker. So maybe there is some truth to it. We don't know, but you never let the truth get in the way of a good legend. So let's talk a little bit about ghosts. There are a lot of ghosts reported in the Bridgewater Triangle, but why? Why are there ghosts? Well, one is because of the history. This area has such a long and rich history, and the ghost stories are a big part of it. Even though the Wampanoags don't talk about their spirituality and their spiritual beliefs, we do know that they have ghost stories as part of that. And also think about all of the settlers that came over from Europe. They brought with them their ghost stories as well. Another reason is the geography. We have a place that is surrounded by water. So that's going to actually cause you to have a higher amount of activity because that water gives a positive ionic charge that will help activity happen. Also, there are other environmental factors, and we can get into the geology, the fact that we are sitting on a giant pile of granite here, and that granite is rich in quartz, and that quartz is piezoelectric, and that piezoelectric materials conduct and amplify activity. So all the paranormal activity that is happening here is helping to charge up that it's getting charged up by that geology. But the biggest reason why we're so haunted here is because of the people. We give our ghosts energy. We give our ghosts a voice. And so with that in mind, the ghosts are going to want to stick around because here in the Bridgewater Triangle, we believe in them. And so if you believe in them, you give them that strength, they're going to keep coming back again and again. So now let's get into some personal Triangle experiences. This is the Fearing Tavern in Wareham. The original part of the building was built in 1690. And we get the opportunity to investigate here. We're the only people that they let come in and do investigations. I used to work at a diner that's right behind it. And as a dishwasher, I would sit there at the back sink, scrubbing the pots and pans, looking at the backside of this tavern and thinking, man, if ever there was a place that's haunted, it's that place. So when we started doing these historical paranormal investigations, I reached out to the Historical Society and we got access to be able to go in there and investigate. And the place just came alive for us. Mike Markowitz, who is an electronic voice phenomenon expert. If you're not familiar with electronic voice phenomenon, then let me just give you a quick rundown on it. You've probably seen it on the ghost shows. They turn on a recorder, they ask questions, and then they leave a blank space, and then they listen to see if a spirit imprints an answer on the tape. Well, Mike takes that up a level, and he sets up radio station style condenser microphones all over the location, and he sits at a soundboard, and he was listening to this in real time. And when we brought him along for the very first investigation we did there, the following week he called us up and said he had over 125 Class A EVPs. That means crystal clear, best of the best EVPs coming out of the Fearing Tavern in one night. Most investigators will tell you you're lucky if you can get one Class A in your entire career, and he got over 100. So he played them all for us, and there was legitimately over 100 Class A EVPs, but there was one that was especially disturbing. There's a story that there is a tunnel that goes underground from the museum to what's now a nail factory, but would have been the river, the mouth of the river right underneath where the nail factory is. And the tunnel had to be built so that they could bring in goods from the river, either without Indian attack or without the attack of the British soldiers during the War of 1812. Either way, the rumors are out there that there is this tunnel. So I thought it would be a fun idea to try and find where that tunnel is in the basement of the Fearing Tavern, figuring it's all been cemented over. But I figured if I found where the tunnel is, they would let me dig up the basement of this, 300-year-old tavern. I probably wasn't thinking, but I did find a hollow spot underneath the concrete, and we were banging on it with a broomstick. And then once I found where it was hollow, we started clearing off some of the dust on top of the concrete floor with our shoes. And so you hear a shh sound. And in that sound, a voice came through, and I'm going to play that for you. So I'm going to put that on the screen so that you can see it. Hey, Ashford, I killed Grandpa Ash. I just knew that you'd feel the pain. You can consider it a gift. So I'm going to play that one more time with it on the screen for you.
That's good.
It has like a growl at the end of it. That really freaks me out. Really quickly, I'll play for you this quick video because I am just going to keep an eye on the time, but I also want to make sure I play you some of these clips. So this is when we were investigating that very same night. We had a camera set up in a room where there's a bunch of toys on a shelf. And while we don't normally give a lot of credence to what they call orbs, because most of them are dust or moisture or bugs, excuse me, this one is a very interesting one. Look in the upper left-hand corner of the video as it goes. You'll see it kind of flitter into the frame and then disappear into one of the dolls. So there it is, flittering in. If you miss it, don't worry, it'll play it again with a zoomed in view. So here you go, and you can see it kind of flitter in right about there. And then it moves in a straight line, but slower than a bug normally would. We'll do it one more time. And here it comes fluttering in and then disappearing behind the doll. So that was the Fearing Tavern Museum. The Oliver House in Middleborough, another fantastic place to go and check out. They do paranormal tours there that you can go and check out for yourself. Whether you are an experienced investigator or a beginner, they do different nights for all levels of experience. In that place, I have encountered shadow people in the basement, and shadow people are considered to be a type of paranormal entity that aren't quite fully formed beings. So it's not like seeing a full-bodied apparition like you would consider a normal ghost to be. These are kind of the shadowy outline of a person. But we've seen them standing between two living people. We've seen them circling around us, getting up in our faces, all kinds of things like that. And the Oliver House has some of the most intense shadow activity that I've ever seen. Another location that I've had that same thing happen is War Memorial Park in West Bridgewater. You can actually go there if you want and check it out for yourself. Technically the park is closed after dark, but as long as you're respectful and quiet, normally you can hang out in there for a little while without anybody calling the cops on you. And you can go there and see exactly what we saw, which was in this little area in the middle of the park where there used to be a factory back in the 1700s, a mill, I should say, not a factory, a mill. We saw shadow people walking back and forth as if they were just going to work. And we'll wrap it up with everybody's favorite Bridgewater Triangle haunt, the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. I don't think I need to give you the rundown of what happened on August 4th, 1892. Just know that it wasn't 40 whacks and 41. It was more like 11 and 19, I believe. But Lizzie Borden, was the only person that was ever brought to trial for the murder of her father and stepmother, but she was acquitted on all charges. It's also become known as one of the most haunted locations in the world. Of course, new ownership took over this past year, but before that, we had over 24 investigations that have taken part in there, and this is a clip we got in there. So, sorry kids, I should have warned you. That's some foul language. That's what it's saying in that clip. So I'll play it one more time really quickly. So I have another one that I can play that is a little bit more foul language in that, I'll leave it up to the group. Just really quickly in the chat, do you want me to play it?
Tim, you can go ahead and play it. That's fine.
It's okay? All right. If any kids learn any new words as a result of tonight's presentation, don't blame me, blame the ghosts. So what was said there? Well, and I'm going to play it again so you can hear it.
Again.
So yeah, not everything we got out of there though is negative like that. One, you might have actually heard it on a recent TV special. The way the producers presented it is a little bit different. They said that it was conducted on the night that they were investigating. That wasn't the truth. It was actually, years ago when we were doing an investigation, but it was the investigator on the TV special who caught it. I think she was just presenting it in the footage to the other investigators, like, here's something I caught. And when they were editing it together, the editors made the mistake of thinking she meant she caught it that night. So, but this is what we caught, which we believe is the voice of Lizzie Borden herself. And Luann Jolly captured it on her recorder. So what we think we have there is what sounds like a female voice with a Victorian lilt to it, saying, "But I'm a good daughter." Now, we don't know if that means I did it, but I was a good daughter and I was driven to do it for some reason, or if it meant I couldn't have possibly done it, I was a good daughter, but this could be Lizzie's voice. And we'll finish it off with a little piece of video footage. This was captured the same night as those EVP clips were caught. We had a camera in the third floor guest room where it's supposedly haunted by two children that were killed next door by their mother, who was a relative of Andrew Borden. So there's a trunk of toys, and we placed this hardwired IR camera on top of the trunk, and watch what happened on its own. The camera actually moved on its own, even though it was hardwired and those wires were taped against the wall. So nobody stepped on the wire, nobody tripped. So they reset the camera. This is the investigator resetting the camera back to its original position. That's actually Luann, who you might have seen on the Curse of Lizzie Borden. Those orbs are just bugs. So they're stepping on the cable, trying to see if they can make it happen again.
It did it again.
It just, that time it picked up and moved. So that's the very interesting Lizzie Borden house. Again, it's under new ownership, so I haven't been there since they've taken it over. I don't know how they're doing things over there, but still, I'm fortunate to have been able to get over there all those times. So again, here's all the ways to reach out to me and to follow along with me if you want to do that. Of course, the Midnight FM show starts at 10 p.m. tonight. We're going to be talking with Jim Perry of the Euphomet podcast about all different kinds of mysterious, strange stories. So it's definitely worth tuning into if you like creepy stuff and you're looking for more of the same. In the time that we have left, we can get into some of those questions. If you want to drop those in the Q&A, I will read those out loud. So Maura asked, how did I get into this field? I actually got into it by my aunt and uncle owning a haunted house. I was always interested in it, but once they bought that house and I would stay over there, I realized that I had to face the fact that this stuff was real. And so that led to me reading every book I could get my hands on, watching anything about it on television. And then once I started doing radio in the early 2000s, that's when Ghost Hunters came out and the paranormal became popular. And I pitched the idea of doing a paranormal radio show to the program director. He liked the idea. And from there, it just took off. I had no intention of becoming an investigator or a researcher, but here we are, almost 16 years later. And now that's, it's changed the entire worldview for me. For everything that I thought that I knew before has all changed. Maura also asks, how much of a part of physics are a part of the paranormal activity, such as EMF and things like that? So many people will say that we can't prove the existence of ghosts until we can prove it using physics and our understanding of physics, because we use these detectors to try and detect the presence of a ghost. But an interesting fact is there is no device that's ever been created that can detect a ghost, because we don't know what a ghost is. All we're detecting with the gear that we use are fluctuations in the environment. So changes in the electromagnetic field, changes in the temperature. Basically, long story short, we think that we're getting an endothermic reaction where a ghost is pulling in heat energy to be able to manifest. Now, I'm starting to think of it's a different thing altogether, and that the reason why we can't prove ghosts through physics is because they don't follow the laws of physics. Ghosts aren't physical, they're emotional. And they're a physical manifestation of our emotions. And if you don't think that that's possible, just take a look at your dog the next time you come home and see that, big look of love on their face because they missed you all day. Or walk into a room after two people have been arguing and feel that tension in the room and tell me that you can't physically feel emotions like that. Jane asks, why did I think the tavern was haunted when I looked at it from the diner? Because it's old. It was from the 1600s. So looking at it, you would just think, man, there's a lot of history there. There's got to be a lot of ghosts. Maura asks, what is the most recent paranormal investigation that I've done? I recently investigated War Memorial Park again with some friends. Nothing really happened that particular night. Next Saturday, I'm going to be investigating Longfellow's Wayside Inn. That'll be pretty cool. And then a couple of weeks ago, I investigated the USS Salem, when for the first time, I think I actually had a ghost. I don't want to say like I wasn't channeling it per se, but I definitely during the course of that investigation had thoughts that were not my own. As we were sitting down there investigating in the bowels of the USS Salem, all of a sudden I was just hit with a bunch of thoughts of, this is stupid. This is stupid. You all look stupid doing this. Why are we doing this? I should just grab all my stuff and go. And I was ready. I had my backpack packed and I was going to grab that and just go up and leave and never have anything to do with the paranormal again. And my friend Jeff Campbell was there and he said he could see that something was wrong with me, that I was physically, my face looked different. And I think what it was one of the former Navy sailors that haunts that particular area of the ship thinks that the paranormal is dumb. So he was kind of putting those thoughts into my head a little bit. What's my favorite scary movie or story? The Amityville Horror is the case that I've always been obsessed with. And I will just tease it with that and say you can watch the documentary on Tubi if you want to find out more about that. Jane wants to know, did Lizzie Borden die in that house? No, but she did die in Maplecroft, which is the house she lived in after the murders, which you can also, if you've got, $800,000 kicking around, it's for sale. You could own it for yourself, but that's the house where she died. Let's see. Do I hear any paranormal activity in Raynham? Always, especially the Hockomock Swamp. There's a lot of activity that happens over the Hockomock Swamp. Any chance of investigating the Houghton Mansion again? Unfortunately, no. It is now owned by a company that wants to turn it into an art gallery, so they're not really open to the paranormal. The most haunted place I have experienced in Massachusetts, I do think that the Houghton Mansion had some of the most activity that I've ever encountered, but Lizzie Borden's is probably the most haunted overall. Favorite Bigfoot story of the Bridgewater Triangle? I like the story that Joseph DeAndre tells of encountering a Bigfoot, but I don't know if I believe all of it. But that was a Bigfoot actually following him around. So that I think is a very interesting thing where instead of us just encountering them in the woods accidentally, they seem to have an intelligence, and they are looking into us as much as we're looking into them. Were you able to find the living descendants of the ghosts you have been uncovered while investigating, like of the Ashford guy that was mentioned at the Ghost of the Tavern? We could not find any record of any Ashford being related to the Fearing Tavern. There are some ghosts that we do encounter that still have living relatives. Some of these ghosts are people that we knew ourselves before they passed on. So we always have to be careful, because you want to make sure that you're respectful of the dead and respectful of the living. So I try to make sure that if it is a recent death, we don't talk about it publicly. We don't put that evidence out there for anybody, but it does come up quite a bit. It's just a matter of towing that line and being respectful. Have I ever investigated the Conjuring House in Rhode Island? No, I haven't, but I am going to be part of a live stream event on Halloween weekend. If you go to the darkzone.tv, you can find out about that. They're actually going to be investigating there all weekend long. I actually filmed a little bit of a talk show with Jeff Belanger, who you've seen speak at libraries all over Massachusetts, including Tewksbury. He is one of my best friends in the world, and we did a really, really cool and fun thing that I think you'll like during that broadcast. It's called Haunted Hops, not just because we're going to be hopping from one haunt to another, but because we also drank beer while we were doing it. Have I ever been to Stoughton for any activity? Or have any spirits gone home with me? I don't think I've investigated anything in Stoughton, but there was a group that was working in Stoughton covering hauntings, because there were a lot out there. And has anything ever followed me home? The answer to that question is yes. I didn't believe that ghosts could follow me into my house. I thought it was my safe space, but I had a spirit that followed me home from the S.K. Pierce mansion in Gardner. That just wanted to let me know that, yes, I can follow you anytime I want, and there's nothing that you can do about it. Have I ever investigated the Boston Common? Not really. I've gone there with a ghost tour, but never conducted an investigation.
Tim, there are two questions in the chat as well, one from Sandra and one from Colleen. They're towards the very end.
Let's see those. All right, Sandra and Colleen. Let's start with Sandra. Are you familiar with the iHeartRadio series of Bridgewater? What did you think of it? I did listen. I haven't caught up with all the episodes, but I listened to the first 5, I think, or 6. I thought it was pretty interesting in terms of the way they were using the storytelling to present the facts. And I thought it was mediocre voice acting from people that I thought would do a better job. But they did do a pretty good job of weaving in the legends. Where I had a problem with it is when they started using some of those legends to do the commercials. So they're talking about, these legends to promote insurance companies and all of that. I think they took that a little bit down the disrespect road, but other than that, the main crux of it was pretty well done. Colleen wants to know, do I know of any ghost sightings in Plymouth on Route 3 South near Blood Pond, a figure of a Native American? Maybe not specifically that case, but there are Native American spirits seen all over Plymouth. I actually live in the south, I live in far east Wareham, kind of South Plymouth area. And we have a Native American female that's seen walking through people's yards here, as well as some other spirits as well. Has the USS Constitution been investigated? I don't think it has been on the record, but I know some people who are paranormal investigators who worked on the ship. So I would say I would put money on the fact that it has been investigated. I think.
Yeah, and Tim, so then final 2 questions are in the Q&A, if you want to read those, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Have you ever hosted group investigations where your viewers can join you in person? Yes, we actually run historic haunted investigations to help raise money for places. You can follow along with me at spookysouthcoast.com. Follow me on social media. That's usually where I put out tickets for those events when we have them. How do the people in the original Bridgewater Triangle feel about the expanded version? I think it actually expanded before they really realized what was going on with the Bridgewater Triangle. By the time it really hit a mainstream consciousness in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was too late. We'd already expanded the triangle. So as much as I think some people hate the term, a lot of people love it. They've embraced it. And they like to walk around wearing T-shirts such as this one. Bridgewater Triangle. I'm disappearing on the map.
So Tim, thank you so much. Do you have any last words for the group before we end the call?
No, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their Friday night for hanging out. And thank you for being willing to get weird with us. Don't stop. Keep coming back for all the great presentations coming up. And then try to be weird, 365 days a year. It works for me.
Well, thank you so much, Tim. Great job as expected and as usual. Want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you to the 12 libraries who partnered with Tewksbury tonight. Look for an email from me tomorrow morning with a link to a feedback survey and a link to this recording. And I hope to see some of you for Jeremy DeTremont's Haunted Lighthouses of New England tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. So thank you again, Tim. Thank you all for watching, and go Red Sox. Have a good night, Tim.
Good night.